Okaeri, welcome back to my channel, May Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today I'm super excited to be hosting the first of the Cosmere deep dives that are going to be on my channel. As PL, who's next to me, is also a co-host of Page Doing. He's starting his Cosmere journey, and so I have also Rodger from Rodger Reads and Bryce from Shelf Centered with us. All three of us have already started our Cosmere journey, and we're excited to talk to PL as he kind of enters the world. So maybe I just gave a quick summary, but if everyone could just introduce themselves, maybe their channel and where they are in their Cosmere journey so far. For me, I have read everything in the Cosmere except for Tress. I know, I haven't gotten a Tress yet. Tress and Secret Project 2. Whatever the wizard one, I don't remember the name. I haven't read either of those yet. But besides that, I am caught up on my Cosmere.
Is the new
Secret Project 2 is non-Cosmere?
Yeah, that's
it's non-Cosmere. Okay, so I've only got Tress to do.
Have you read White Sand then?
Okay. You know what? I think I did. I think I read that a couple of years ago. I don't remember it, but I think that it went in my eyeballs. Layla's here. Hold on. Hi, Layla. Thanks for joining. All right, so why don't we maybe go with PL and then just go in a circle? Does that work for everyone? All right.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm PL Stuart, author of the Drowned Kingdom Saga, and I am Taylor's, as Taylor mentioned, I'm one of the co-hosts of Page Doing with Taylor and Steve Talks books. So this is my entry into the Cosmere. I'm so grateful to Rodger, Bryce, and Taylor for trying to explain things to me, unfurl me, help me understand the relevance of this series, because obviously Brandon Sanderson is, Taylor and I were just talking a bit prior to starting the broadcast, that, I mean, nominally he is one of the top fantasy writers out there in the current space. And I kind of started the series because I felt, largely because of Taylor, because I kept hearing Taylor rave about Brandon Sanderson, and seeing her books and getting a bit of FOMO. And then so many of my friends in the writing community loving Brandon Sanderson, going to the bookstore, and people's, most of the conversations I would overhear would be about Brandon Sanderson. And, if you go to the bookstore in Canada, and Chapter's a big bookstore here, he's the one author that he has a little section, right? Like everyone else may have a shelf or two if they're really big enough, but he's probably the author that has a section. So his books are always there, are always in stock. So speaking to that popularity, I thought, why don't I start? So thanks, friends, for helping me understand what's so big about this, what the big deal about the Cosmere is, and Brandon Sanderson's writing.
All right, am I next?
Hello.
Sorry.
Hello, it's clockwise, sir.
I will fight you. Sorry. I was like, did I space something? Sorry, Rodger.
My name's Rodger from Rodger's Reads. And I have read everything in the Cosmere at least once. I'm currently working my way through a reread with some friends, trying to get ready for Stormlight 5 coming out in November 2024. So we're working our way through rereading everything, which has been interesting having it in context now that I've read everything in the Cosmere.
That's something I definitely want to do at one point. One day when I put my TBR on hold to do a reread. I think that'd be fun.
That's why I spread it out over 2 years for this read along. I was like, we'll do like every other month. And then when we get to Stormlight, it'll be like every 3 months, because like the books are thick.
It's like a modified how Brandon Sanderson writes them. So,
There you go. What about you, Bryce?
Okay. Oh, it's my turn.
I guess.
No.
Yes, you're allowed to speak now.
I should be skipped, I think, after that faux pas. My word. Anyway, I'm Bryce. I'm from Shelf Centered. I've read A Drowned Kingdom. Highly recommended. You should totally read that. So good. And
I second that.
Yeah, so good. And
point. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's hard. And I was just kind of looking it up, and I was like, I think I've read 5 if you count Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, the novella. So I'm still semi newbie, and the big one that I haven't even touched is Mistborn. And so that's like, I've been kind of saving it for the right time on the channel or whatever. And this was perfect time. So I'm excited to get into that, because that's like everybody's favorite. Well, other than maybe Stormlight. So I'm excited. I loved Warbreaker too. That was a good one. But Elantris, Warbreaker, and then a couple Stormlights. And so anyway, and I love Wave Kings, so I just had a blast.
And you only read the first
Okay.
two? You read Way of Kings and Words of Radiance?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I like that we're all in different
Right.
parts of our journey. I like it. So
I
what were you
did do
gonna
my
say?
job at all. I'm sorry. I've only read Way of Kings. I want to clarify. I didn't even mention that. Sorry. So I'm a
No, that's
complete
You read, it in,
newbie. You
you
must.
read it in that disgusting little mass market version? Well,
Right? Right?
I'm-
Like the book that thick and that tiny.
I like my mass market paperbacks, to be honest with you. I really do. I really enjoy
too.
them. So
Me too.
Oh,
The look of a hardback is great, but the feel in the hands, I love a good mass market.
no.
I just don't break
It's
spines.
floppy.
So like even when it's like if it's a mass market, I'll have it like barely open. So like
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's how
I'm the same. Maybe we make ourselves miserable, Rodger. Maybe that's why we hate them, because we can't crack the spine. Oh man. All right. So now that we've kind of done a summary of where we are, just a disclaimer for those who watch this later, maybe in comment or in the chat now. We are going to do full spoilers for The Way of Kings, but we're not spoiling anything outside of that one work in the Cosmere. So please keep all of your comments spoiler free for Connections or any other series in the Cosmere. But for The Way of Kings, have at it. So I kind of wanted to start with a pretty basic question, which I think a lot of us have talked on our channels before about being character-based readers. So I wanted to ask what your favorite character is from this book, not taking into account really where they go later in the Cosmere, if you've read past it, but in this book itself, who struck you as your favorite character? For me, I think it's Yasna from this book. I love her so much. She strikes me as every time I read a scene with her in it, she got my full attention. I couldn't look away from her. And I really like the way that she challenges the accepted norms in this world in the way that other characters don't even think to do. So I usually enjoy characters who do that. And so she really stuck out to me in this first book. Also, just letting you guys know, we'll just go in with spoilers now. So if you want to talk about specific points, have at it. But I think Yasna's my favorite.
I think I must admit, I do love nice characters, but I tend to like the really messed up, damaged, twisted ones, the ones with some issues. That's what I like to read. That's what I like to write. So, and you forgive my pronunciation because I do tend to butcher pronunciations as I mentioned before. So Shalyn, her character was probably one of my faves. Her journey, the fact that she's living a lie. Any character who's living a lie, who's not pretending to be someone else or pretending to be doing something other than what they're really trying to conceal. Those are characters I love. And I also liked Cicadas, the High Prince Cicadas, the kind of the bad guy.
Sadeas. You guys know how to say his name? I've never said that out loud before.
I think the audiobook
Bryce,
says
you're on
Thaddeus.
mute. You're on mute.
Sadius?
I'm just saying, Bryce, you're on mute, but Sadeas? Okay.
That's what the audiobook says. So
Sorry.
if you want to believe that Michael Kramer and Kate Redding have the authority on it, then that's how they say it. But it's Sadeus, however you want to say that, Piel.
Okay, well, thanks, Rodger. Yes, Sadius. Yeah, he is, because it seems that he is, there is some virtue there, but mostly buried underneath many layers of cruelty and other things. So, yeah, he's definitely a political player, and I love those scheming political players. You know, if it's a Game of Thrones, your little fingers, your viruses. Like, I love those characters. So, yeah, those are probably my faves.
Like, now it's trying to remember, like, where are they in this book? So if I'm thinking only way of Kings,
Yeah,
I think
right?
Shalon's plotline was my favorite plotline. Her whole, like, trying to get the glove from Yasna thing. And I really like Yasna in this book, but I don't remember. I don't remember all the interactions with Yasna all that much. I just remember Shallan more than anything from Way of Kings. And then obviously I remember the moment with Sadeas later in the book. But I think it'd have to be Shallan for this one.
I'm also a fan of Shallan. I like her a lot. I know a lot of people don't, but I like her too.
I mean, she grates on my nerves eventually, but in book 1, there was still love there.
She hadn't pushed you yet.
When I reread book 1, because I read it so long ago, just book 1, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna actually read this series, and reread Way of Kings pretty recently. I liked Shallan a lot better than I did the first time. I did not like her the first time, but I really liked her the second time through. So it's weird. Anyway, maybe just knowing. But I guess it's mine, huh? I'm gonna go kind of pretty boring, frankly. I just love Dalinar. He's one, like, he's not afraid to be a weirdo when everybody's doing one thing. Like, I kind of like that kind of person, like not afraid to like push against like the grain. Like, this is where everybody else is going, and he's like, nope, I'm gonna do this thing. I do like his honor, though. He's like, you know, we learned all those lessons from Ned Stark. Speaking of Game of Thrones, that if you're too strict or whatever, it could backfire. But anyway, I like that, again, with being able to like be pushed. Like, are you still going to stick with that idea? Anyway, I thought that's cool, but it is kind of a really boring one.
I don't think so. I think Dalinar's a great
I think the most basic
too.
answer would be Caledon.
Right.
I was gonna say Caledon is definitely the. I mean, I think everyone can safely say The Way of Kings is Caledon's book. He's the main character. I think that's the vibe I get anyway. Because I did do it. I've read The Way of Kings twice, once physical and once via audio, and I would say it feels like Caledon's book to me. Of course, Shallan has a really big part in it, but we're learning his story. So I'm kind of curious for you, PL, reading this. One of the things people say about Sando is that they like his character work. So I'm curious, as someone who your books, are very character based, and you have a very you focus a lot on us getting to know the characters in the first installment of your series. How did you feel about the character work in the first one?
I have to say, Taylor, the character work was, and this is, and I don't want to make this sound uncomplimentary. The efforts at character work were exceptional. Even though some things didn't work for me, like Sanderson takes great pains to craft these characters that are 3-dimensional, they're believable, they're relatable, and he gives them really well fleshed out backstories and motivations and all these enormous personal stakes and quirks and emotions. And I don't know why sometimes they felt a bit flat for me. I think I know why, but we'll get into that later. But I found myself craving a bit more the morally complex characters like Sadeas, whatever his name is. But that's more personal taste because I love my dirty, messed up characters. But I can't fault some of the parts in that. With the sheer amount of detail that we learn about the characters, the personalities, and what makes them tick, we do get a really complete picture. And, it is my kind of book, definitely that way, because at the end of the day, it is great characterization. It's just, I felt it was great characterization, but that was mainly because the book was so long and we spent so much time with them, right? There's been books that I've read that they have fantastic characterization, but they're very short or much shorter. I mean, but let's face facts. This book is bigger than most fantasy books, which tend to be tomes. But I actually think that at the end of the day, I ended up loving the characterization. But I guess my only complaint would be regarding characterization would be that maybe it was because we spent so much time with them rather than what necessarily Sanderson brought out for the characters. But that's just a personal opinion.
I mean, a lot of people say that they connect to the representation of depression that Caledon has in this first book, especially that pivotal moment when he's in the chasms and he's thinking of unaliving himself. That moment, I think, is one that a lot of people have talked about connecting to. Personally, for me, Caledon, I don't connect with him in the way that I connect with characters sometimes. But I think what makes his story work for me is the way that he interacts with those around him. I'm also a side character kind of gal. I love I love Rock so much.
Yeah.
I love him. And so his interactions with Caledon make me like Caledon more, if that makes sense. So I think that that type of character work is what really works for me. But I also love the trope of a bunch of disparate personalities coming together to do something. So Bridge 4 was like made for me as a reader because that's just a trope that I thoroughly enjoy, especially with Syl always putting her little quips in there as well. So for me, Bridge 4 is like the peak, which is the part of the book that I think that I enjoyed the most. I don't know if you guys feel the same way about Caledon or anything, but it's the way they connect with each other that works for me.
It's kind of like
I definitely know people that are ride or die for these characters. I am not as ride or die for these characters. I don't know. I have yet to find a Brandon Sanderson character that like really sticks in my feels forever. Like I know some people just are obsessed with Caledon and like that kind of stuff. And I think they're good characters. But I think some of his character work gets repetitive because it's like, I don't need you to tell me that he's depressed that many times or like have that many moments of it. And I get that people connect with that and they resonate because it can be a repetitive feeling in your mind when you have depression and stuff like that. But from a reading perspective, from like an enjoying my reading experience, it gets a little tedious sometimes. It's like, yeah, I get it. You already told me. Let's move on.
Yeah.
I really started to feel that. I mean, I'm not trying to get into it, but in book 2 was where I was like, oh, like it is a bit much, right? Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into it too much, but I like that, like the movie Miracle, right? The hockey team kind of rising above, even though they're complete underdogs, and this kind of idea of, you know, shaping up a group of disparate people and being able to make something of yourself. And I thought that was really, you know, that really stuck with me on Bridge 4. That's absolutely like got me like, oh my gosh, yeah, they became something. And even though they were just dirt, considered just complete dirt by everyone, even the nice people, right? Even the considered nice people, whatever, but just walked all over. And they was like, well, if you can lend a little bit of like, you know, and that's why it's like, I don't know, this just idea of like, you got to believe in yourself first, right? And that's where they started, and then others can get along with that.
Yeah, I really did. For me too, Bridge 4 was one of my favorite parts of the book too. And especially because what I love about books is that, I mean, obviously you figure Caledon's probably got enough plot armor that he's not going to die. And that's the way everything seemed set up that he can't be killed. However, everyone else around him was definitely, and characters that I liked, side characters that I liked, I didn't feel that sense of safety. And that's what I love. I love reading a book where I don't know who's going to make it or not, and that I have to worry about someone not making it. So that was, for me, one of the things I think I loved about the whole Bridge 4 thing. And the fact that they always went to these impossible situations that were always dangerous, and they weren't expected to make it. Like, they were all expected to die. So if some came back, it was more of a surprise, right? And instead of just, you know, revamping the entire company with fresh bodies, that was a really good element of what I really enjoyed that part. I mean, it was really well done. What Sanderson did with creating that sense of uncertainty with those characters, those side characters, who's going to make it and who's not going to. So,
yeah, I care more about side characters maybe in this first book, but I would have a hard agree about Caledon. Yeah. And then Layla says, it feels like life is happening to Caledon. I think this is intentional, while Shallan is trying to make something happen in her life. I do like Caledon, though. And I will say this is a really good point, because one of the things I think I enjoy about both Yasna and Shallan is that usually, not all the time, but in typical fantasy novels, I feel like female characters, in order to preserve some kind of like moral goodness in the past, they didn't make decisions. Things happened to them and then they were forced to make a choice. But nowadays we're seeing a lot more characters pushing the plot forward, or female characters pushing the plot forward by a choice that they made, whether it be a bad choice or a good choice. That's one thing I really like about Daughter of the Moon Goddess, actually, that duology, because our main character is like, well, I don't care if this is the wrong choice. This is my choice, is what I'm going to do. So I think I really enjoyed that about both Yasna and Shallan, because Shallan, I mean, bless her heart. I've done a booktube bartender about the Way of Kings, and the drink that I made for her was, oh my God, why am I blanking? The one with all the alcohol and all the different types of alcohol in it, with Coke.
Long
Why am I
Island iced
blanking on
tea.
it? Thank you. I made her a Long Island because I was like, this drink is a mess and it shouldn't work, and so is Shallan. And somehow she works. I was like, she's the epitome of a Long Island.
What's great is that it doesn't work, right? Like her plan,
Right.
it like
Right.
fails miserably.
Yeah.
Because she's a mess.
But then it kind of works.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
But then it works,
And-
right? Like that's exactly it.
Then Layla also says Bridge 4 is when Caledon starts making things happen. Yes, I agree. That's when he actually does something rather than life happening to him. Yeah. So that kind of touched on the characters we've got here. But of course, we all know what Sanderson is really, really known for is his magic system and his world building. That's, those are his two stellar points. And in my opinion, where he really, really shines, I think most people would say that. So the world building, when I first read The Way of Kings, was something that struck me. The first thing I remember is when I was reading about how like the grass disappears into the ground when the high storms come, and how the entire environment has adjusted to match, this world that he's created. I was blown away by that aspect of the book. So I don't know how you guys felt when you read it, but I remember very distinctly reading that passage about the grass, and I was like, this is so cool.
I want to hear from our resident scientist before I talk.
Yeah, Rodger, go ahead, school us.
No, I enjoy that he takes the time to think about how the weather phenomena that he decides to create would affect the flora and fauna of his world. I think it's one of the strongest things that I like about him is he's almost like a sci-fi world builder, but then it's full of magic and kind of cool things happening. It's almost like medieval sci-fi feeling, because it's not like spaceship sci-fi, but it is totally different worlds, different like species of beings that feel like aliens that you could find on another planet. And I think it's a cool fusion that we don't see all that much, because he's not just doing elves and orcs or like his twists on them. He's making up completely new worlds with completely new laws of how nature works. And then he likes to think through how that affects how people live their everyday life, how even the cities have to be built behind those big walls that have to face the storms. Otherwise, they're just going to get like wrecked. Like, I
or
appreciate
underground
that he really,
in like a maze underneath it. That one blew my
he
mind.
spends the time to think about how would this really work. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and obviously Roger's a very intelligent guy and a scientist, and I am exactly the opposite. When it came to science, quantum, mathematical stuff, I'm a big failure. And I'm also notoriously, I do appreciate a really good hard magic system, but I typically enjoy the soft ones more. That said, again, Brandon Sanderson, he is the guru for me. Like it is so intricate, it's so exhaustive, it's beyond compare. Like shard blades and shard plate and the high storms, latching, all these magical elements that are in there is just meticulously like itemized and laid out, and it has this preciseness that it almost defies credulity, right? And it's like reading about botany or zoology or chemistry or something, right? But it's substituted with magic, kind of the way Rodger hinted, and you know exactly how the magic works for the most part, how powerful it is, who can wield it, what the cost is, and basically everything in between. So, I have to give him a hats off for, like, I've never read anybody. So a big shout out, I have to say this, to Thomas Howard Riley, who wrote Rebirth Remorse. He's the closest thing that I've read to something that intricate and detailed with a magic system. Shout out Thomas. He's an indie author and a blog with Before Go blog. But Sanderson is the Don. He's the master. Like, I have never read anything like that. I doubt ever will again. He's peerless, I think, when it comes to what I've read so far with hard magic systems, and that seems like, it seems like science. And the world building itself, yeah, it's staggering, man. It's got everything. He's got, religions, cultures, history, customs, social castes, fashion. That's one thing that really stuck out to me about the Way of Kings is fashion. How he's very detailed about describing what the different cultures are wearing and the etiquette with wearing certain things like glove. Like, yeah,
it's very Robert Jordan. You can see his Wheel of Time influence on talking about clothes. Maybe a little bit too much.
Right. But it does even play like a part in some of the plot, like with Dalinar being like his household, they dress with military, so people can look to them in an emergency or whatever, and that's like their whole thing. I liked, Rodger, how you said the science fiction, because I actually made a top whatever video of like best fantasy for science fiction lovers, and it was like I just kind of put Sanderson in as like not really in his like, it's like his fantasy is I think right up the alley of a science fiction, like someone who loves science fiction, because it is meticulous and it is like that exacting. It is scientific, absolutely, and even just the magic system or the world, and it's really laid out that way. And if your mind kind of draws to that for science fiction, then you might enjoy it for Sanderson for fantasy.
Yeah, I think, and it could have positives and negatives, right? So the first beginning of this book, we have 2 prologues, right? So, and one of those prologues is spent making sure that you understand this magic system, and it hits you in the face right away that this is going to be a hard magic system. He doesn't really play around with that. And I've heard some people say that was a bit of a turnoff when they're used to softer magic systems, to just kind of spend an entire prologue trying to figure it out from the beginning. Now, one thing I will say is I think Sanderson does repeat things, and that is a valid criticism, talking about telling you that Caledon is sad again. You can assume he's sad. But I think one area where that does help is explaining his magic systems. So if you don't get it the first time, you don't have to. You can trust that he's going to introduce that to you again later. So I remember when I read the prologue for the first time with Zeth, I was like, I'm not going to remember all of this. But I didn't have to, because he does show you little tidbits of that later. And it's like a reference that you can go back to where everything is kind of in one place. So I think for me, that's one case where his repetition works. Yeah.
Arguably, Stormlight is his softest of all of his magic systems that we understand the least in the Way of Kings.
Yeah.
Like if I compare it to his other magic systems where they are much more very strict, I feel like you're only getting the first hints of what Stormlight is able to do in Way of Kings. Just compared to something like a Mistborn where we have the medals, we know exactly what the medals do, versus this one we're kind of figuring it out as we go, which I think was a nicer approach, because like you kind of learn it as Caledon is struggle busing, trying to figure out how to climb up the wall out of the chasm and stuff like that. I think he did a much more organic way of showing this harder magic system in Stormlight. I still think the books are far too long, but I appreciate that we had that development.
I feel like Sanderson kind of got into that realm of like, because he had such success with the Way of Kings, and it was just like things were blowing up, that it was, I don't know. I feel like the authors get that big and the editors start going, well, we're just eventually going to release a definitive version anyway. Might as well just let it all go in anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I think PL made the point where a lot of that time is just spent getting to know the characters. And if that's not something you enjoy, I can see why the length is like, all right, at a certain point.
I'm more of a plot-driven reader.
Well, that's so good. We have balance here, because I'm characters all the way. So we balance each other. Because I'm like, give me Bridge 4 for like 5 chapters. Do
you think it justified being over 1,000 pages? Were you never bored? Was it always like page turning for you?
I think that's a good point. I would say I've only done it twice, right? The first time was physical, second time was audio. So I think the first time through, I was so enamored because I actually picked up The Way of Kings as my first intro to the Cosmere, and I didn't know what it was. I was in my Japanese library, and I was like, I've never seen that before. I picked it up and I was like, what is this? Right. So I was so enamored by it because I didn't go in with any expectations that I blew through it. But the second time, the audio is ridiculously long. So I do think that if I were to sit down and read physically again, it might drag in some places. But for me, Words of Radiance justifies its length, which is, I know, is crazy to say. I love that book. But The Way of Kings, you could argue me down a couple hundred pages.
You know, it's funny. I personally, and we're gonna get to this later, I hope. It wasn't, and Taylor knows this. It wasn't like Taylor. I'm extreme character-driven reading. It wasn't so much that I didn't have a problem with how much time we spent with the characters because I am that character-driven. And like I said, I do think that part of the reason why the character work was so well done is because we spent so much time with them rather than. So it comes out to me to the words on the page, and I guess when we talk about prose later, whenever we get to it, that if I had an issue with
now if you want
the book, that was that. Yeah. So I mean, that's and you know, who am I to say that, you know, this man sells, you know, more books than 99.99% of all you know, fantasy authors, and I understand why, because aside from all the other pauses we talked about, his prose is what's considered accessible. I would think most people would say that, you know, the reason why people love his prose is that accessible. And I actually didn't have a problem so much with the repetition in his book, because I don't mind when you try and kind of hammer things home to me to a certain degree. I think what it came down to was, and maybe it was because of the other things that I was reading at the time, I was trying to understand why the prose, Sanderson's prose didn't enrapture me, why it didn't work for me. It's direct, it's efficient, it does convey the story adequately, and that ultimately that's all you can kind of ask for as a reader. Like, that's all you can ask for. That, you know, did you understand the words of the page? Yes. You know, was it adequately told? I guess because I always hope for so much more. And Bryce has read Janie Words. She's my favorite author. You know that, the prose here is not like someone like a Jenny's, right? And I'm not expecting every writer to write like that. I'm just saying, like George R. R. Martin, his prose is fairly lush. I just felt, I think that I don't always need ornate prose, and people like Jenny are often criticized for the density of their prose and the ornate descriptiveness and things like that. But Sanderson's prose was the opposite. It was just a bit too Spartan for me, like that I couldn't completely absorb myself in the story at times, not all the time, just sometimes. And because there weren't things like, okay, for example, Mark Lawrence, Joe Abercrombie, the snarky wit, like those are things that, okay, well, if you're going to read, especially a book that's this long, if you're going to read a book this long, and I'm going to be like, okay, I'm waiting for that next big, laugh out loud moment where maybe it's something grotesque or it's dark humor or whatever, or I'm waiting for that passage that is so beautiful I just have to read it 3 times. Like, I didn't have a lot of that in the book, so I guess that's why it wasn't able to completely sink its hooks in me. So that was the, I'm a sucker for lush prose. That's my issue. That's not Sanderson's. And especially
that's
when
a feature, not a bug. That's a feature, not a bug. He's talked about it before, how he likes to think of writing as like a window, and he likes to have the clearest window possible where you just can see the landscape, whereas some authors like to have the most beautiful ornate windows, and in his opinion that can hinder seeing the landscape for the way that it's written. So it's definitely a feature, not a bug, and if that doesn't work for you, that is valid.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess because there was a lot of really good, poignancy of parts of this novel, and sorrow and pathos and good with light. And to match that mood, I was looking for something a bit more elegant. I think that's probably my final comment. That, like when you read, and I hate to keep referring to something like Janie Words, John Gwynne. So let's stop using, John Gwynne, more accessible prose, but he has those passages that just like smack you, right? So yeah, that's more what I was looking for. But that doesn't mean, like I said, some of the parts, amazing book, but that was I think I rated it 4.25 stars. If the prose was elevated, that would have gotten into the 5-star territory for me. So
I like how you put the Janny Wirtz, but if you like, I think about it like Janny Wirtz books. Sometimes they take me a while to read because I'm always rereading lines because I'm like, holy cow, I got to read that again. Did you see how that was put? Oh my gosh, like how do you even think that way? But it does, like, even doing that will like pull you out of the story to appreciate that prose. And that's what I like what Rodger said. Like, it is more the stories above all for Sanderson, and then, you know, and whether it's character, the plot trying to push you forward. And I felt like that's why I just read my eyes out going, this is a 1,000-page in hardcover book, let alone that mass market that's like 1,300 or whatever. And you're like, and I just read them like it was a 200-page quick book for me, is even just the first time through.
That made me want to put Kyle's comment up. Way of Kings felt very slow to me in the first half, and then after that, I was off to the races. And then you commented here yourself, Bryce, but that they read like much shorter books for me.
Yeah.
And I agree that I speed through them. And I would argue that his books, there's different reasons to read different books for different moods as well. So for me, and I know people are probably sick of this comparison, but I do think that there's merit to comparing this to, oh my God, Pregnancy Brain is Real. What is the big movie franchise with the Avengers in it?
MCU.
With the Avengers in it.
Marvel.
Thank you, MCU. Yes, Marvel. That was it. Bless my heart. I forgot the word closet the other day, so this is on brand. But but the MCU, I do think that there's merit to that, because you can just watch those like eye candy if you so choose. And I do think that because Sanderson's prose is so accessible and you can see straight through that window, it can just be that if you so choose for that to be your reading experience. So I would argue that Janny Wirtz or someone who has more elevated prose, you have to, not have to, but going into those books with a different mindset is pretty important, I would say. But it's completely valid. Like Rodger said, a lot of people don't like that experience with his books.
Oh, hey, Chad.
I just wanted to put up some. We have a couple people with us. Who's the newbie? And I saw Bryce answered this, but yes, PL is the newbie with us.
Yeah. I'm the newbie, Kyle. I'm a newbie.
But I also appreciate that PL talks about it as a personal preference, as opposed to certain articles that have been going around talking about like this is appropriate for 6th graders, or like all the snobbery.
Right.
That was horrible. That was atrocious. What that Wired columnist did was deplorable. And hey, Tori, amazing Tori. Yeah, and we talked about that on page 2 the other day, that, you know, objectivity, I think is a trait that any writer, journalist, especially journalist, should have, and there was zero objectivity in that piece. And you know, you don't have to be a fan of Brandon Sanderson or anyone else to denounce what that columnist in Wired did. I mean, it was clickbait, probably, but in any case, Brandon Sanderson, as I said, you know, like, I mean, just because the prose didn't work for me, I think someone like Taylor, who knows me really well, would say that I'm the kind of person that if the book is good, it's good, even if I didn't even like it that much. Do you know what I mean? Like, and maybe that sounds like a contradiction, but the world building was amazing. The magic system, the storytelling, there's so many things about this book that were amazing. What didn't work for me? The prose. Well, that's one aspect, right? The themes worked for me. Like, there's many components to a book that make a book great, and I don't just not like a book because the prose didn't work or I didn't like this character. I think that's, you know, I don't think I'd be fair and objective if I, especially as someone who considers himself, you know, somewhat of a now reviewing books and blogging. It's all about, I try to break down the parts objectively and say, you know, if a book has 5 or 6 main parts, let's just say, did 5 out of the 6 parts that I think were really well done? Well, that's a pretty darn good book. And I'd say that is the Way of Kings for me, right? But and maybe the prose will improve. I don't know. In terms of, for me, what I mean, and what I don't mean that Branson's going to suddenly start writing like Janny Wirtz. What I mean is that maybe the prose will click for me as things go along, because I compare that to something like Malazan, which, you know, Malazan, wow, like no problems with prose, but damn, I was lost for the first, 400 pages of Guards of the Moon. I was like, what the hell? And I felt stupid. Like, what am I reading? What did I miss? I don't know what's going on. And
You missed
that
everything.
yeah, and that took a while. But then suddenly, after reading a couple of Erickson books, it clicked. So that's what I'm really hoping for this, because certainly an author of this caliber certainly would deserve a chance to read not just one book and write him off. I don't think I've ever done that per se, unless a book is for me horrible. Like, I would never just write off a book or a series, especially someone with this much gravitas behind their reputation, etc. So like, I'm here to help friends like you guys help me appreciate the love for the book and make me understand why the whole universe that Sanderson has created is so good and so compelling. So,
well, something we were talking about behind the scenes before we went live, PL and I were talking about, was that you were not looking for, but you are entering into this knowing that there's Cosmere connections, knowing that people talk about this wider universe. And I think you had mentioned you were surprised how little of that seemed to be present in the first book in like one of his major series. And this is just my theory, so I'm really curious to hear what Rodger and Bryce think. But I think up until the recent release of The Lost Metal, Sanderson was trying to make it so that you could read just this series and leave it at that if you wanted to. And there might be some mysteries plopped in there, that you could pick up on, Easter eggs. But if you weren't curious to figure those out, you could read the series just as it was. So I think The Way of Kings is written in that way, personally, where there aren't too many things you'll pick up on if you haven't read other works, and that was purposeful. So that kind of, I also feel like that would affect the way you read the book, knowing that that's something, I should expect this. Whereas when I picked it up, I had no idea that I should be looking for these things. So I feel like that might have also been something you were looking for, or people who start the Cosmere nowadays might start looking for, and then it's not there. And a lot of people, myself included, find a lot of joy from the Cosmere from that aspect. But it does take a couple books to get there, which I think is asking a lot of readers. But I'm curious for Bryce and Rodger what you guys think about like The Way of Kings. Do you think it was written that way specifically?
I think it's like the first Avengers movie, right? Where you're not really getting all of the connections to all of the wider stuff yet. I don't think that the doors really get blown open until probably Rhythm of War and Lost Metal is when you really start to see overt crossovers. Before then, I think it's more about their like foundational things about how the magic works on different worlds. That if you have some kind of understanding, that's more the crossover. And that's a lot of people's complaints about the Lost Metal, is that all of a sudden what were hints and things they had to look for and go into the Reddit threads kind of like hypothesizing about are now like very overtly stated crossovers. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. Like there is stuff there that if you know more about investiture and wider Cosmere lore, that you will see those things, but they're not really in your face in Way of Kings at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is it's more in the background, but I have less experience in it. As you guys, there's like certain characters I kind of knew that like like carry over or whatever, but it, and that was, I could see people kind of being upset if it was too overt. I remember really fun thing about like Kings of the Wild is like I caught a couple of the references, to like songs. Because I think that's the classic rock one. And then but then like looking it up and I was like, oh my gosh, I missed so many of these things that he just like threw in that I wasn't paying attention to, and had to go through the Reddit thread to like go, oh man, there's a lot of fun to that, a lot of merit to that.
I think the retrospect, aspect is a huge part of the enjoyment. Like for me, the times that I get the most excited in a Sanderson book are those moments where I'm like, oh, I see that. Like that brings me joy. So I think that's a big part of it for me personally. I also,
He's
you
kind
know,
of
the
moving away from that
Sanderlanche is
now,
the
right?
thing.
Because like I feel like there's
Sorry, what?
people in Rhythm of War that were like, I feel like he's moving more and more away from you being like having that retrospective, because now we are like
Yeah,
full tilt, we know
that's true.
crossovers, names, and all that kind of stuff. Because I remember when Rhythm of War, no spoilers, but like there was a person who showed up that there was like so much buzz about who was that, and like all these people talking, you're like, wait, what? Did I miss something? And you would like go back. So like he's definitely moving away from that.
But I think that that's a valid thing for him to do at this point, because if you look at how many books are out in the Cosmere, it's a lot. And at this point, I'm like, just go for it, because we all know it's coming. So me personally, I don't mind. I don't think it's a criticism, but that is a big joy when you're first getting into it, when you start.
Well, and I think we learned from, speaking of the MCU, like you got to be careful, because I feel like a lot of people bailed after Endgame. You know, you had your like culmination, and then like they have been struggling ever since, and struggling for the MCU, you know, is like still doing pretty well. And I've liked a lot of the like unique, weird stuff, like WandaVision, like being able to kind of push some things in such a mainstream like idea, and then push some weird stuff out there like Loki was able to do too.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, so like I think that was a great analogy, Taylor, to the MCU. Like, and what Bryce said is a really good point. And so now, you know, with the MCU, you have to look towards signature characters and signature movies about those characters to get what you would have gotten from all the characters, the band being together, right? Because it doesn't feel the same. You know, like you can't replicate that feeling if you took like, you know, whatever, Black Knight, you know, Black Panther, all these characters that are kind of carrying the franchise in their own separate way. If you got them all together, I don't know if it'd have the same chemistry as what the old Avengers had. Maybe it would. I don't know. I don't know enough perhaps enough about the MCU to know that, even though I've watched almost all the movies in every. But I know how I felt though. So what I'm saying with Cosmere is that for you three, and especially Rodger and Taylor, that have read, you know, pretty well the whole thing, like, is it that the main series, like the Stormlight, feels a certain way versus, you know, other books? Like all my friends tell me that Elantris, that's, you know, you read that book, that's your kind of book, PL. And, you know, if you read this book, and they've described all kinds of, I don't know all the books, I don't know all the series because I don't know Sanderson that well, but they've said, oh no, these Sanderson books, these are the ones you need to read because that's up your alley. Like, is it more like that, or is it that you read this main like part of the series, and that's your gateway and access to you feeling, oh, I'm part of something big, like the Cosmere?
I would say for me, it's that the worlds are so distinctly separate. They're so different. So starting with Roshar was my basis, right? So I started with The Way of Kings as well. And I actually went back and read Mistborn after, which, you know, it has, in my opinion, a completely different feel. I don't think people would argue they're similar at all. Roshar versus Scadrial, where the place where Mistborn takes place, they're extremely different worlds, and they have extremely different feelings to them. So does Elantris. So it's not necessarily for me that the books are written differently. It's that the places that we are so distinctly different that it feels like I could read these separately and they're not connected, which is why for me there's so much like ooh when you actually find something, right? Because they feel so different and they're so fully developed in their own right.
And even
Warbreaker as well.
Even in the Shadows for Silence in the what is it? Shadows, just had it up. Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, the Threnody, right? Even that, it's only a novella, and you're like totally different, completely. Yeah. But it's the same, like Sanderson describing this like crazy world and different kind of magic, even there.
Well, I think that's one thing about Sanderson is he doesn't have a particularly strong narrative voice. So you don't really notice like a narrative change between his books. Like I I don't know that I would read something and be able to tell like, oh, that was immediately Sanderson if it wasn't like a world building or a character name, because to me, he doesn't have like a distinct authorial voice in the way that somebody like an Abercrombie or all these other people that have their very distinct voice in the way that they tell a story. But I would agree with Taylor that it's more about how the worlds are different. But then when you get far enough, you start to understand the fundamental laws of his universe, and then you can start to put it all together and see how things are related to one another. But it's very similar to like MCU. You can either watch the characters' backstories first and then go into Avengers and see every Easter egg, or you can watch Avengers first and know that, oh, that was probably an Easter egg, and then catch it when you go to the other thing if you liked it enough. I don't think there's like a wrong way of doing it.
Oh, that's excellent.
That's a really good
point. Yeah, that's a really good point, Rodger. Yeah.
Because when I was actually planning the reading order for PL, he was like, can you tell me what order to read these? I was trying to think of what PL likes in his books and then, you know, trying to work around that. So in my personal opinion, okay, you're on my channel, so Mistborn slander a little bit. Arrow 1's not my favorite. I don't think his character work is up to par in that book. I think there are a lot of things that are amazing, you know, the world building, the magic system, all of those things. But knowing PL, I was like, I don't know if I want to start him on Mistborn, which is why I started with The Way of Kings. But that's just my personal opinion. So this reading order is definitely
is obviously his arguably most crossover appeal with YA. It's the most new adulty. It's like one of the only ones that's marketed and has different covers for YA and adult for a reason.
Right.
Like it probably is the more accessible one, but for somebody like PL who loves a Janny Wirtz or like the dense prose and stuff, like I would say Way of Kings or maybe Elantris, because it is his most probably political one of all of them, where you have like some commentary on religion and stuff that maybe might work. But if you just really wanted to see what a Sanderson can do and you're not turned off by 1,000-page books, there's nothing wrong with starting with Way of Kings.
Yeah.
Oh, and what Rodger said really struck me. That was an exceptional point. Rodger about authorial voice. So what I did was to challenge myself, because I want to make sure I call myself out on things that I'm not doing right, is I tried to I picked some reading directly after Sanderson. I didn't get to it all because of different things, but I thought, okay, if I think this is good prose, then am I fooling myself that this isn't? So I read things like Tad Williams, right, which I hadn't read before. And his prose is pretty good, but it's not uber elevated, but I think it's somewhere between it. It's really good, it's really effective, but it has that lyrical quality, but it's not there all the time. It's something that's very direct. I think it's like, I'm not trying to rate prose. I'm thinking like, for me, it was a bit of a step up from Sanderson, but not that far of a step. But I totally loved his books. And, you know, ones I read so far, the two I read so far, the character work and everything else. And it was very similar to this, if I really break it down to brass tacks, except that they were shorter. So maybe Rodger hit the nail on the head that maybe I was looking for more of a definitive authorial voice, because I felt that, for example, Tad Williams had his voice. I know Gwyn has his, George R. Martin has his, Janny Wirtz has hers, Erickson, Baker. Like I felt when I read their books, as to Rodger's excellent point, if I picked up a Scott Backer book, I would know, okay, that was. If I picked up Janny Wirtz, well, that's written by Janny. I wasn't sure if I read a book by Sanderson, I didn't have his name on the cover, if I necessarily know it was him, unless it had that magic system, probably hard magic system thing to say, okay, well, no one writes magic that. So I think maybe that was.
I would say that means he's achieving his goal, though, then of straight through the window, because he's not in the way. You know, his voice isn't in the way. So I think that's a great point on all sides. That's part of it.
Yeah, but if you're somebody who likes that feeling of like a friend telling you a story, I don't know that he necessarily hits that, because you don't have that feeling of the person telling you the story. You just get the story, for good or ill. Like if you love it, you love it. If you don't, you don't. But
no, that's the point. But that's why, again, he sells so many books, because so many people that want the story, you know, unvarnished. Like, give me the story. I don't care about, you know, how well you describe that fireplace, but give me the story. So, and I totally get that, right? And you know, and maybe, like I said, I think this is a me problem. It's not a Sanderson issue, right? It's not like he's a bad writer. It is more my appreciation for certain things. But again, you know, there were so many things to love about this book that you know. And when I hear people like you, whose opinion I respect, telling me, you know, hey, continue on, and you might find that, because again, that's exactly how I felt with Malazan. Remember Bryce and AP, those guys, Malazan, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. And at first I was like, oh my God. But then as I started reading, and I had people like AP and Bryce and Angie help declutter me a bit. And then we got really lucky.
It was cheerleading.
Yeah, and we got that Stuart Erickson himself come on and kind of join the chat. It's like, ooh, he kind of blew our minds, but in a good way. So maybe who knows, we'll get Brandon Sanderson to come on one day, and kind of
fingers crossed.
Yeah, but
it's exactly opposite with Erickson, because I read Gardens of the Moon and I had my snot being like, why do people say it's so confusing? This is literally D&D. Like, because I'm so familiar. Like, I have 3 shelves of Forgotten Realms books. I know D&D magic systems. I know lore. I know all of that. So I was like, Tis to Andy are the Netherese, and I like immediately, and I was like, okay, like what? It's like all these people talking like this is the best thing since sliced bread. Where? I know that it's more philosophical as we go, but
I love that.
That's awesome.
Never heard anyone say it before. Derek said, I felt like Mistborn was a primer for Sanderson's fans to get them into Stormlight, in the sense that Mistborn gets broader in scope with POVs and the 3rd book being longer. Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think, a lot of people say that should be the entryway into the Cosmere. And I would argue for a lot of readers, it could be. I just didn't think it would match PL so well, personally, knowing him. I would rather you get invested.
With the one-offs.
I just thought
for general
PL likes big books and he cannot lie.
Sorry, Rodger, would you say that last part, Rodger?
Oh, I said for people who aren't as well read in fantasy, I would probably steer them towards Elantris or Warbreaker first to just get a flavor for what he does without being committed to a 3-book or 10-book or however many book series. If you just want to get the flavor. But if you're kind of committed and you want to see what he can do when he's really putting everything together, I think Way of Kings is probably it.
Yeah. Well, I know Taylor would never steer me wrong. So.
I'll do my best.
She knows me well, so that's yeah.
I thought his was kind of butt cheek, so I'm still like, yes, Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy's awesome.
We can have this channel allows Mistborn Era 1 slander. I allow it. So Era 2, I like it much better. But
I always hear everybody loves Era 1 better than Era 2. Like, that's usually the typical thing that I hear.
I know.
So I'm excited to get into it.
I'm a bastion here of Era 2 love. There's a couple of the people who've agreed with me. But also, I mean, something else is that for some people, Sanderson's humor does not work ever, and that's fair. But for me, most of the time, he makes me giggle. So Wayne, I'm sure you've heard the character named Wayne. It's not a spoiler. I know Rodger is not a fan. Wayne works for me. He's a comedy relief character, and he works. Therefore, Era 2 works. But we won't go there. So just before we, get too broad, because we really went broad in scope here and talked about writing style and all that, let's bring it back to the Way of Kings at the end here and talk about maybe PL, if you have some questions, some theories, any ideas from the first book that you'd like to put out there, plot-wise as well, because we haven't even talked about the Parshendi or the Parshmen, or we haven't talked about Hoyd. We haven't talked about a lot of stuff. Chasm Fiends, right? The awesome characters.
I just saw, when I saw the drawings, I just felt like Starship Troopers. It brought back the Starship Troopers.
That's true.
Like those bugs that would just, get disintegrated by the blasters. And but you know what?
PL, sorry. I just want to cut you off for 1 second. This comment, my only Sanderson so far is Warbreaker, and I read it last month. I'll plug my ears if you spoil. We're going to spoil the shit out of this book. So just letting you know, thank you so much for coming. But if you don't want to hear details about the Way of Kings, maybe bookmark this and come back. Yes. Okay, go ahead, PL.
Okay, sorry. So I guess there's 3 kind of things that I want to pull on with this plot. So again, the Shallan plot, more that, because Jansa seemed to have forgiven her. Like at first she thought she was committing suicide when she broke the picture and she cut herself. And then it seems that Shallan is going to be more powerful than, she is now. I get that sense that she's going to be more powerful. Like that's one thing that I felt maybe wrong that I definitely picked up for, that her power is going to increase. And I don't think that the Sadeas, like that whole, Sadeas, that whole plot, I don't think he's done. Like I think there's still, something there with what he's going to be planning in the future, like sinister stuff. Because
he's a rat bastard.
I think he's just that kind of guy, and I love that. I love to know that that's going to happen, because that stuff is the juice. That's the juice that I love in a book. And I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, that if Caledon is some kind of chosen one, he's going to be the man of this series. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I mean, the guy, nobody can have that much plot armor unless they're going to be used later on, right? Like this guy's literally, arrows are whizzing by him and everybody else is dying around. Like, I mean, the guy, he is like, if anyone's covered in plot armor, it's him. So I assume he's going to make it far in this series. So those are kind of my three big, if you want to say predictions, it's not really predictions, but just, what I see happening going forward, at least for the next book. So.
We can neither confirm nor deny.
Yeah, we won't confirm or deny. But your comment that Caledon has plot armor, yes, just yes. Clearly, in this book, he does. But what I did like is that the plot armor was pretty blatantly justified by the fact that he has these powers other people don't. Like he just says, "Yep, he does have plot armor because he's overpowered," and I appreciated kind of that bluntness. Instead of just being like, "Oh, he's just lucky," he was like, "No, actually, has more power than these people, even though he doesn't know it yet. Therefore,
and it makes him more depressed somehow."
Yeah, he gets sadder. Yeah. Do you have any predictions for how? So Caledon ends this story being with Dalinar now, right? So he's been elevated, skipped all the ranks, and kind of has hopped to the top of society in a way. But he still has his deep-seated hatred for Light Eyes, right, at the end of this series. So do you have any predictions for maybe Dalinar, Caledon, like where you might see that going, or you're just along for the ride with those two being together?
Well, Dalinar, what's Dalinar? What's his son's name again?
Adolin?
The older one, yeah, Adolin, the older one, not the younger one. So
Adolin
he
and
seems,
Renarin,
he seems like he's set up to basically be the heir, right? But I don't see that happening, because I'm wondering if Caledon's going to end up, if all of them die, or Caledon becomes the next High Prince, or like there's something there to like I said, no one has that much plot armor. I write books. If I'm going to write someone with that much plot armor, they're gonna, I love killing my darlings, but strategically, something like that's going to be something big, right? So I almost wonder that, and I know with the Knights Radiant, that coming more to the forefront, assuming that they're going to be present in the world, right? I know that seems like there's a tie there. So I don't know where it's going. So that's one good thing, because I'm not a fan of predictable plots, so I honestly don't know where it's going. But that's what I see has been laid out for us, that Caledon's going to become some big lord, leader, battle person. He's going to take over that forefront position, because he's been a leader in the past, very successful on that minor scale, right? And he seems to have all the traits of compassion. He worries about leading his men, to be killed. He's someone who will sacrifice himself for the, he's not quite a Jon Snow character, but he's kind of like that, right? Like, when again, I'm comparing to Martin, and the best, easiest analogy, like, yeah, he's kind of that guy. So I don't know. That's what I sense.
I just appreciate Taylor's poker face when you're saying stuff. She's just like,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're totally wrong.
Totally. The one thing that we didn't talk about is how we didn't talk about Zeth much.
No.
And how he's just been going around killing people left and right? And we find out at the end that the reveal that he was hired by a specific person, right? The person that was the last on his list. And then it was like, we find this room, this medical room where they're slowly killing people in order to hear something, right? To get some kind of hint. So that kind of hints to me at an overarching plot that we didn't really dig into in The Way of Kings, but obviously something is coming. So
I found his whole story rather odd, interesting, but rather odd. And almost like, here's a guy with all the power seem in the world, but yet he's because he's so despondent about the fact he has to kill people and he leaves himself so vulnerable. It's almost like, self-punishment. He becomes this essentially, he's a slave. He, becomes someone who's taken advantage of, and he does it purposely, punishing himself, like almost like a self-flagellation thing. Like he had a really interesting but weird arc in this whole thing, and I didn't really quite know what to make of him. I assume his role will be to kill somebody important down the way, but otherwise, I was very interested in. I actually found his arc fascinating, but really weird, and I didn't quite know what to make of him. Like, this is a guy who he offs the High King, and then he's so guilty that he goes into this spiral, and then he gets used again to kill. Like, he just it's a weird. I found interesting but weird arc.
I think that's a fair assessment because we don't really have much more information. By the end there, he's just like another sad boy, but he's an assassin this time.
And you're going like, so if he has all that power, but he's like so concerned with almost like the afterlife because he's like bound, right, by this honor idea. Yeah, I know exactly. That's what it just is very fascinating going, is it like some religious cult or something or what? Like, yeah, very fascinating character. But I just love, the magic of the lashings is so cool. Yeah,
that was cool. That part was like, whoa. Like, that was almost like a Matrix moment. Like,
yeah,
what? Like, like that battle when he goes to kill the king, like that was like, and for someone like me, I appreciate good battle scenes. That was freaking out. Like, that was awesome. That was awesome. And even just the deception at first of who, you didn't know at first that who he was facing, and then it turned out to be the king. Like, it was well done. It was well done. So there was a lot to like. I felt like I'm definitely going to continue. I'm probably going to get to the next book. Words of Radiance. Is that? No, Oathbringer. Not Oathbringer. No, Words of Radiance.
Words of Radiance. Yeah, it's the second one.
Yeah, that's the next. Yeah, so that's my next. What I'm tackling next. So I'm looking forward to it. Probably will get to it in May, early May. So I'm hoping you guys are willing to join me again and help keep guiding me through this series. So I really appreciate it. But yeah. Another 13.
The reading order that I had, and feel free to, Rodger and Bryce, feel free to say something if you think I should change some stuff. But it was Words of Radiance next, and then while we're still fresh in the Stormlight world, I was going to do Edge Dancer, and then after that, switch to Mistborn was kind of the plan to kind of start branching outside of Roshar. I figured that would be kind of good to continue the momentum for a little bit, because there's so many questions we have at the end of The Way of Kings. So that was my thought. But
when it sounds like you want to, just based on some of the things you said, you guys said, because I'm going to be with PL very soon, right? Words of Radiance is as far in this series as I've gotten, and so, but it just sounds like this. It might be important to have read some Mistborn before we get too much further into the rest of these. So. I'm excited.
Once you get to Rhythm of War, you probably need to have read Warbreaker and probably First Era Mistborn.
That's what I'm thinking
but
too.
Oathbringer, you can kind of slot in wherever. It's not really starting to have all the come together moments yet.
Yeah, but I figure after reading 2 giant tomes, at first with Stormlight, we'll go with Mistborn for a little while. Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
Because like the whole Mistborn trilogy is like friggin' Words of Radiance.
Yeah, right.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. Well, I Taylor was so thoughtful in making that suggested order. I trust her implicitly, so I'll follow that order and keep reading
Okay.
as per. I bought the books based on that order, so I have all the
Okay.
books behind me so I can just read whenever I want
Okay.
to.
I would say
So
just temper your expectations for crossovers. The only crossovers currently are Hoyd is a character that shows up all the time. You won't get much information about him for a while. And foundational things to the wider universal lore are crossing over, but not people yet.
And Hoyd has different
Thanks
names,
for that.
right?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sometimes.
It goes by
Sometimes
different
he's
names.
usually referred to as Hoyd, except for maybe Stormlight.
Yeah. So.
okay, thanks for that, Rodger. I appreciate that. Yeah, any help the newbie can get is much appreciated, right? So I am a voracious reader. I read a lot. I read constantly, and I'm a pretty fast
Your
reader.
speed is unmatched. It's incredible.
No, yeah. SB, have you had people like SB and Timmy, those guys?
Esme?
They're on another level. Like I think I set my Goodreads goal very ambitiously at 100 books this year. I'm on track, but barely. So I can see myself not making that. But like even Andrew
Stormlight's not
reads.
helping that, but with the page count.
The big ones, yeah.
Yeah, but Andrew reads like Andrew Wizardly reads. He reads.
I don't know how he does it. I really don't. Respect.
Just doesn't prioritize other hobbies.
Right?
If you only spend your time reading and don't go on walks in beautiful Japanese nature or whatever else, you could probably read more too.
True.
Or if you were getting ready
it's
to
a
be
rainy
a
day,
mother.
so maybe that's what's on the docket today. I know Bryce has to go soon, but I just wanted to, it's a very unique position that you're in, Bryce, where you have only read the next book in the series. So, Rodger and I kind of have other context, but I'm curious for you, if there's anything you want to tell PL, like something you enjoyed about Words of Radiance or something to look forward to.
Oh man, it's definitely a different focus. I think you'll like, because it's one of your what you've mentioned is one of your favorite characters, and I like that. You get a lot of backstory, so that's cool. Like it's like, oh yeah, like anyway, it's really enlightening. I thought it's cool to see, and maybe why I appreciated that character more on my reread. I'm being like vague for probably no reason, because but it's different, but it is like, I don't know. Anyway, just exploring all the things that you wanted explored in like Way of Kings had to like get you there, and then now it's like, all right, what are we doing with this stuff? I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. I love that. And I love backstory. I'm one of those suckers for tell me all about what happened, 30 years ago and why you're so twisted, right? Like I love that stuff.
You will love as we go on, because every book has a different flashback character. I'm pretty sure book 2 is Shallan's flashbacks.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
So you get more about your girl.
And why, and getting into like the whole plan, right? And her failed but winning plan.
Somehow bumbled through.
That's my speed. So okay, I'm getting excited. Like I said, I'm gonna hopefully get to it in early May. I got a couple of I've been reading some Chonkers reads recently. Like I have Grace of Kings coming up after a short. I'm reading Tori's book right now, and then I'm doing Grace of Kings. This is all largely because of Taylor. Like I read Jade City, loved it.
Oh, it's so good.
Loved it, and reading Tori's book now, Tori Tekin's book, Phased, and then on to Grace of Kings, then another Jenny book, and then I'll probably get sometime after that to this, because they are chonkers. Let's face it. This one is it looks like it's the same size. So yeah.
That mass market
each book
is pretty big. Yeah.
They're a little bit 100 pages longer each book.
I'm somehow surprised by that each time. I don't know why. I was like,
should be expected, right?
Yeah.
Like the 5th Stormlight's probably just going to be it's just a Bible. Just accept that it's going to be a Bible.
I think he's shooting for 450k words or something obnoxious.
Yeah. Well, this got to be 400. This got to be around 400,000 words.
I think that's about the average.
Like this is about 400,000 page book, and you know what? And one thing I got to say, hey, if you're gonna read a 400,000 page book, it better be readable. Like it better be like you better be able to like. I would have a hard time reading a Jenny Wirtz book that was 400,000 pages. I think that might be a bit overwhelming even for me, and I love her writing, but half of that, yeah, bit over the big toward 3/4, but yeah, this is but again, millions and millions and millions of copies sold, so there is something to this series. There's something special about it, obviously, and there's something special about the man and his writing. So I just want to get a chance to appreciate that. So I'm gonna keep reading.
You're in the right company. I think we all appreciate it in different ways. So it's a really good group here, actually. So
no, it's a phenomenal group. Thank you so much for letting me be part of it. I'm honored.
No.
You guys have so many great insights about this stuff. So be leaning on you. Be probably DMing you, Rodger, like, hey, I don't know what's going on with this. And,
I love your authorial insights into it. That's always just another unique, really cool perspective, especially because I know how much I like your book, and so and it's like that, like knowing that and knowing like your approach to these is really cool. It's been really insightful, so I appreciate that, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. It was like, who let this guy in? I don't know.
No, you're so humble, man. You're such a smart guy, so much insight, and you're a lawyer. Damn it! Like, come on, man. You're
argue this.
I just feel like, I mean, when I look at someone like Sanderson and his body of work, like I'm only 2 books in, as I started really late, but when I look at what Sanderson's done, like how much he's written it, like it's astounding. Like, it's just astounding. Like this, like hats off to this guy. Like he's a testament to, obviously his marketing and everything else he does, but being so prolific, man. Like this guy, he's
Well, that's why we all laughed so hard when he pulled out his first secret book that he read or that he wrote, and then he's like,
second one. I think I think you can have whatever opinion you want on him. I don't mind, right? I'm not like one of those people who's like defends him at all costs, but I do think that the article that he wrote called Outside, I think, Rodger, you said you had mentioned you'd read that too. The recent article he wrote was a beautiful way to describe why he writes so prolifically and so much. So if you haven't read it, I think I would recommend people watching this to read it. It's not long, really, and it's a really good insight into why he just pumps out so much work. So,
and one more reason to be frustrated with that article of like, when someone asks you not to reveal something about them that's that personal, like, don't do it.
Maybe you shouldn't. Yeah.
The Esquire article is much better because there was another article that followed up on the Wired one. And I enjoyed them poking at the Wired person, trying to ask for comments, and that guy would not give them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that guy, he's basically a troll to me. That guy, you invite, you get access into the man's home that he didn't have to give you. You get access to his family. You basically eat at his table, and then you do that. Like,
My entire vibe was, who hurt you?
Or about tithing or whatever you want, but like his friends, how boring that they made like an apple tart to do a writing group over.
Why aren't they doing tequila shots? Like, that's what I was thinking. Like, what do you expect?
Go back to your canapes with your caviar, snooty man.
Yeah, this guy,
he wears a blazer. Can you believe that? Doesn't work.
Yeah, this guy's got issues. I think a lot of that was jealousy. Wouldn't we all? I can tell as an author, what author would want to have the reputation, sales, acclaim of Brandon Sanderson? There's no writer I can think of that wouldn't want to be in Brandon Sanderson's shoes. They may not want to write what he writes, but I've never met a writer that wouldn't want what Brandon Sanderson has built. That literary empire. Who wouldn't want that, right? So
I mean, the entire vibe for me was just, who hurt you? You poor thing. Someone hurt you, and you're letting it out on the page.
Well, my husband and I were joking. I was like, he must have done something to him. Like, did he leave you and make you walk back to the airport? Like, what did he do to make it so personal?
I think this guy just came in with a hate on, and in his heart, he had some issues with the Mormon religion. You can tell from the article. He had some issues. So he's a bit of an elitist, as Rodger aptly pointed out, with some of the things he said. Like, he has some ish. So he, he just let it, and because he has a pulpit with Wired, then he let it out, right? But I think he's gonna look back at 10 years and go, bad call.
Wasn't worth the clicks.
Wasn't worth it. Wasn't worth the clicks.
Yeah.
Wasn't worth the clicks, right? I think it's
Okay, well, thank you everyone who joined us in the chat and everyone here. But if someone is watching this afterwards, I want to make sure they know where to find you guys if they want to look for more of your content. So let's just do a little sign off, tell people where they can find you and that kind of thing. So why don't we do the same that we did? I can't point. You know what I mean. This way. PL first.
That means
Bryce
I'm ahead of
Rodger.
Rodger this time, right?
I'll do the
You are
Yes.
shameless.
this time, Bryce.
Yeah,
You did jump up the line there, Bryce.
I'll do the shameless
yeah.
self promo thing. Author of John Kingdom and the Last of the Atlanteans. Book 3, Lord and King, is coming out at the end of the month. Thank you, Taylor. Coming out at the end of the month. Part of a 7-book series called the John Kingdom Saga. Website's www.plstuart.com. That's where you can find all the books. Usually you can find me beside Taylor and Steve on Page Chewing, creative interview feature. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. Taylor's second last video, I think, recently talked about some of the guests that were coming up in April.
Yes.
Ooh. So yeah,
Exciting,
it's
very
exciting times. So before we go blog, I'm an assistant editor there, as is Taylor, and you can find my reviews there on Goodreads especially. And thank you so much, Taylor. I'm so honored to be part of this. Thank you so much, Rodger and Bryce, for helping, doing this essentially for me to help me, get through Brandon Sanderson's works. And I hope we can do this again for the next book.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, same. And for me, like, I got to hang out with Taylor and PL before, and got the pleasure of hanging out with Rodger tonight. Just really cool people. So thank you so much. And this is just it's just fun to geek out about stuff we love, and that's why I'm here. And I'm just on YouTube, Shelf Centered, Twitter, Centered Shelf, because that's what they had it. Didn't have to add a number for that. And that's pretty much it. Just get around and do these things. This is the fun part of it. It's the individual videos are fun enough, but it's like really fun to just make good friends and geek out about the stuff. Just like in regular life, there's not tons of people around that read the same nerdy things that we do, and get it, and you get to geek out about it, even though some elitists don't think that that's cool. I'm okay with it.
And then you can find me on the YouTubes at Rodgers Reads. And then I also review basically everything I read on Goodreads, but I am not a bougie reviewer. You will get like very to the point, like, did I love it? Did I not love it? And why? If you want those people that are doing like the quotes from the books, like a Petrick style review, that is not my Goodreads. You will get much snarkier, to the point type stuff of like, this was terrible or it was lovely. And same thing, it was fun to actually meet people, because I feel like I know Taylor because I'm always up in her comments and she's in mine. But this is the first time
right, all the time. I was like,
met
wait.
face to face.
It's like, wait, we haven't done this yet? It's kind of what I was thinking too. Yeah. Well, if you're watching this, somehow you stumbled upon my channel and don't know who I am, I'm Taylor. My YouTube channel is Made Between the Pages. As PL mentioned, you can find me on this channel or on Steve's channel for Page Chewing. You can find my reviews on Before We Go blog, also my Goodreads. I go between reviews that I write officially for Before We Go blog that are like nice ones, and then ones like Rodger described where I'm like, just thoughts. So if you go to Goodreads, you'll get both. But I think you can find me on Twitter as well. And I'll be sure to, in the description, put everyone's Twitter and link to their YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was so much fun. Great way to start my day. And we look forward to doing it for the next book. Getting your thoughts, PL. See if you start to get sucked in or not.
Words of Radiance. Next book.
All right. Thanks for stopping by, guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.